Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this agenda forum. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen out in the gallery and those watching online. Disclaimer: agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by Council at the next ordinary meeting of Council. Agenda forums are not decision-making forums. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and to seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters to the next Council meeting for formal consideration and decision. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time and deputation time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to the Council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Leave of absence, I have nil. Apologies, Councillor Jones is running a few minutes late. Are there any other apologies, Mr CEO?
Mr Mayor, I have no other apologies.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of financial and proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality. Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, we have a few this evening. The first declaration is from Councillor Zanino in relation to item C11, the revocation motion for the modification New Bond Street. It's an interest of impartiality as a previous business partner and owner of the property on the Crescent in Midland. Councillor Congerton in relation to item 4.2, the proposed amendment for Paradise Keys. It's a proximity interest as owns a property adjacent to the site. And also item numbers C16 and C18, the kangaroo relocation and the displacement of kangaroos, and that's an impartiality interest as Councillor Congerton's a member of a stakeholder group. Also Councillor Parry in relation to item C16 and C18, the kangaroo relocation and sanctuary and also the displaced kangaroos. That's an impartiality interest as well, as a member of the Brabham and Peat stakeholder group. And the last one being for Councillor Kiley for item 4.10, the demolition and construction of 12 Meadows Street, an interest of impartiality as he's an executive member of the Guildford Association.
Are there any other declarations from either Council staff? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, just completing them now, Mr Mayor. Impartiality on 4.9 and a proximity interest on 5.2 and I think C1.7. I'm just checking that.
Okay. Councillor Richardson. Someone can give Councillor Richardson a declaration. I don't have any left. Thank you. No others, councillors, staff? Thank you. 5.1 is public question time, which are questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. 5.1 is questions of which due notice has been given. There's a question there from Mr Jacob Martin from Cardno, which has been answered. Item 5.2, questions without notice. I have Ms Nikki Gill wishing to ask a question on item 5.2. Someone want to get Mrs Gill? Thank you, Ms Gill.
Working? Okay, thank you. I had a question. On the 24th of November last year, a request was sent to the City asking when the properties in Henley Brook and West Swan, east of Henley Brook Avenue, were rezoned from special rural to rural residential. Rates notices were provided to prove the rezoning had taken place. A follow-up email was sent to the City on the 10th of December. However, a response has still not been received. Could the City please confirm when these properties were rezoned, why they were rezoned, who authorised the rezoning, why were landowners not consulted about their properties being rezoned, which directly contravenes the Planning and Development Act of 2005?
Mr Valandlin, are you able to answer that? Will you take my notice?
for that. I know that we've answered similar questions to Councillor Catalano recently, so I'll take it on notice and we'll get back to Ms Gill.
Thank you, Ms Handley.
Thank you. I have one more question. I've been informed that there is an Islamic mosque being built in Henley Brook. Can you please confirm the address of the mosque?
Mr Russell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A tad premature. There's many land in Henley Brook that's actually up for sale in the Henley Brook structure plan area, and there are all sorts of people looking at all sorts of things. No one can confirm that a mosque has been built. It was actually there were proponents on behalf of an Islamic college interested in looking at land, doing due diligence. Whether or not they choose, after having met and had discussions with staff, to make an offer proceed to make an offer on the land or purchase, it's another story. But certainly, if anyone wants to develop a school or a mosque for that matter, they'll need to make a development application that will go through that process. So, no, there's nothing that's been built at the moment, and I'm not even certain whether or not the relevant parties have actually purchased the land and then might proceed to apply for such a school or a mosque.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Gill. Now, the questions we take us to 6 reports and motions for which previous notice has been given, presentations and deputations. Deputations in accordance with procedures for public participation in agenda forums. All written deputations received by 10 a.m. Tuesday 9th of March were provided to councillors with the preliminary schedule. Deputations received after this were circulated to councillors prior to the agenda forum. Time allocated for deputations as part of this meeting is approximately 90 minutes. Deputation for all items with the exception of item 5.2, the proposed construction of Henley Brook Avenue, Nangara Road to Reid, will be provided with a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. Deputations in regard to item 5.2, the proposed construction of Henley Brook Avenue, Nangara Road to Reid Highway, will be provided a maximum of 3 minutes. Approximately 5 minutes will be provided for councillors to ask questions of the deputies following all deputations on any item. All questions are required to be directed through the presiding member. In this way, we remain mindful of all members of the public in attendance as to deal with all the deputations in a timely manner and allow time for other parts of the meeting to be conducted. Part A, I have nil. That takes us to Part B. First is item 4.2, proposed amendment 197, local planning scheme number 17, to insert development standards to special use zone number 23, Paradise Keys Retirement Village, lot 501, Paradise Keys. And before we go ahead, the CEO has just reminded me of a declaration. The City's election caretaker provisions policy requires candidates at relevant elections to identify themselves and as election candidate prior to asking a question or making a statement at the council meeting. Councillor Henderson is a Liberal candidate for the district of Swan Hills. This statement is taken to apply to the entirety of the meeting, and Councillor Henderson is not required to identify his candidacy each time he addresses the meeting. My apologies to that, councillors. Thank you, Mr CEO. Councillor Congleton, are you leaving us?
I'm not coming yet, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Just want to give you a head start. The first deputation is from Mr Jeff Blinko against the staff recommendation generally. However, in support of the recommendation to reclassify a portion of Lot 501 Paradise Keys Ballajura to local reserve, it's a written-only deputation. The first in person is Ms Maria Crocker in support of the recommendation to reclassify a portion of Lot 501 Paradise Keys Ballajura local reserve. Thank you, Ms Crocker. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. We strongly support Council's recommendation regarding the subdivision of the 80-metre buffer and its rezoning back to recreation to ensure the long-term protection of this wetland and to further ensure that there will be no future development of this land. In tonight's agenda, it is encouraging to see that Council is attempting to address the concerns of the community. However, there are several points which we believe need further refinement. Firstly, a concerning issue is the height of the proposed 3-storey development. R60 zoning allows a maximum building height of 12 metres. The height for Southern Cross Care's 5-storey design was 11.8 metres. Without further development restrictions, this 3-storey aged care has the potential of being even higher than the previous failed 5-storey design. It is imperative that the new development has maximum height restrictions put into place. A review by Council of this R60 zoning is essential. Number 2, we believe parking should definitely not be within the 6 metre setback from Paradise Quays. It should be provided on the ground level of the development so as not to take up the site's open space. This will also serve to reduce traffic congestion. Number 3, we believe increasing the setback of the buildings on Paradise Quays to greater than 6 metres will increase solar access to the road, trees and surrounds, allowing room for landscaping and greenery and minimising visual impact. Number 4, an avenue of healthy London plane trees exists along the entire stretch of Paradise Quays. However, the current development conditions only include the retention of the mature trees on Alexander Drive, not the trees on Paradise Quays. We would like this clarified to include these trees also. In the previous agreement with Southern Cross Care, these trees were retained. Number 5, on Alexander Drive there is a setback of 10 metres on the northern lot, yet only a 6 metre setback on the southern lot. We believe that this 6 metre setback should be increased to match the 10 metres on the northern side, providing uniformity. This will allow room for planting trees along the southern side of Alexander Drive to match the avenue of eucalyptus trees on the northern side. Number 6, retaining the original brickwork for the Lakes Estate entry on both sides of Paradise Quays is essential in maintaining a suburb-friendly aged care that blends into its surroundings. Concerningly, this brickwork actually sits within the land to be sold. This entry greatly adds to the aesthetic appeal of the area and needs to be retained. Number 7, on the southern side of Paradise Quays, the entirety being an Aboriginal heritage site, there are 2 mature WA Christmas trees which hold great significance to the Noongar people. The Aboriginal Heritage Department will need to be notified to discuss any potential significance and to investigate opportunities for retention. Number 8, the existing footpath on Paradise Quays is actually included as part of the parcel of land to be sold for aged care, and we question whether it would be removed by the developer. If so, the new path would have to be built on government property immediately under the existing London plane trees. This will be problematic for the trees' root systems, which would inevitably be damaged, affecting the overall health of the trees. Therefore, the existing footpath would need to be retained. And lastly, after years of hearing the community's questions and statements at council meetings, we hope that council shows flexibility and good judgment in making necessary changes to the points outlined tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Crocker. Any questions of Ms Crocker, councillors? Councillor Kiley?
Through you, Mayor, could I ask that her deputation be circulated, because I couldn't quite get all of those points down in one hit.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
You email that through, Ms Crocker?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That takes us now to item 4.4. If someone can recall Councillor Conkerton, please. Item 4.4, Responsible Authority Report. Proposed commercial and retail development, childcare premises, convenience store, fast food outlet, motor vehicle repair, recreation, private, restaurant and showroom at lot 9064 Walcott Avenue, Brabham. The first speaker on this is Mr Eric Purvis, speaking against the officer's recommendation in support of option 2. Mr Purvis, when you get a microphone, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the applicant name Hubris, is that how it's pronounced? Hubris. The development scheme that this is relating to, Local Planning Scheme 17, I've got a few points that I'd like to raise with it. 5.1.2, unless otherwise specified in the scheme, development requirements shall be determined by council having regard to any relevant local planning policies adopted under the scheme. So with regard to the proposed development, what planning policies are relevant under the Town Planning Scheme 17? And with regard to that question, how do the development proposals demonstrate due regard to the policies as required by Section 511 of Scheme 17? Does the town planning scheme specify any exclusions that may prevent council from determining the matter and having regard to any relevant local planning policies adopted under the scheme? If so, what are those exclusions? And if not, what specific steps has council taken to demonstrate that it has regard for its policies? 5.22. In considering an application for planning approval under this clause, whether in the opinion of council as a government the variation is likely to affect owners or occupiers in the general locality or adjoining the site, which is the subject of consideration, the local government is to consult the affected parties and have regard to expressed views before granting it. So, in accordance with that scheme, has the council formed an opinion that the planning approval for the proposed development is likely to affect any owners or occupiers in the general locality adjoining the site? If not, when will council be forming such an opinion? How will that opinion be formed? And how will council advise residents that it has formed such an opinion? And if it has formed that opinion, when did council consult with those affected? What was the result of those consultations? And how has council had regard to the expressed views? We move on to 5.53b, where it says the power is conferred, and then it goes on to say, without affecting the generality of A, the non-compliance will have an adverse effect upon occupiers or users of a development and the inhabitants of the locality. And then the questions about that would be, has council satisfied itself that the proposed development meets the criteria set out in clause 10.2 of Town Planning Scheme 17? If not, why not? And when does council propose to satisfy itself of that criteria? If so, what satisfied councils that the proposal would have no detrimental impact on the streetscape, be generally compatible with the current setting, and not raise any local issues that would have an effect on the amenity of the locality, and preserve the amenity of the locality and not generate additional traffic? As the site is adjacent to the Swan planning area, one may ask the following questions. How does the proposed development conform with the planning objectives set for the area, clause 7.1 of the Swan Valley Planning Act? And how does the proposed development maintain the planning objectives set for the area of the Act? And how does the proposed development maintain the planning objectives under clause 7.3 of the Act? It appears the officers themselves have already determined that the application is non-compliant to the spirit of the planning scheme insofar as they have prepared an option 2, showing the reasons why it can be rejected, and as such I would respectfully urge councillors to adopt option 2. The proposed development does not meet the principle of good design relating to context and character, legibility and safety, as described in State Planning Policy 7, Design of Built Environment, and the design requirements contained herein with the Brabham Activity Centre Plan with respect to high-speed street frontages and pedestrian linkages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Purvis. Given there are a lot of questions there, you might want to email those through if you want to get those answered. Any questions of Mr Purvis, councillors? No. Thank you, Mr Purvis. Next speaker on this item is Mr Sean Morrison from Urbis on behalf of the proponent in support of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr Morrison. You have 5 minutes.
Cool. Thank you, Mr Mayor. As mentioned, my name is Sean Morrison. I'm a town planner at Urbis. Urbis are the applicants for the proposed development at the Brabham District Centre. On behalf of the proponents, Arise Developments, Scott Jansen from Arise Developments is behind me on my right. This development is proposed along Yildeen Road in Brabham, immediately south of the Coles Shopping Centre, which is under construction at the moment and soon to open. Our proposal, which we call Brabham Common, incorporates a new childcare centre with over 100 places, a new major gym, a new service station and a car mechanic, some drive-through restaurants, and some supporting specialty tenancies which may be used for cafes and showrooms and the like. This $10 million investment will bring essential services to the Brabham community and complement the shopping centre. Residents will save time and money from having to travel as far as they currently do for their basic retail needs or for simple things like going to the gym or getting their car serviced. During consultation, this kind of refers back to the earlier deputation, the proposal was advertised to surrounding residents directly, I understand, and was also available on the city's website. A total of 39 submissions were received from the community, of which 28 did not object or supported the proposal. Many comments welcomed the new services and jobs that we brought to the area. Almost 75% positive submissions is somewhat rare in my business, and really speaks to the need to fill those service gaps which the community is experiencing. The proposal underwent independent design review by a specialist commissioned and chosen by the City. As a result of the review, and in a collaborative process with City officers who made a variety of changes to the proposal, and it's worth noting that the design review in the agenda is the original comments and doesn't reflect an assessment of what changed. So the changes we made included more trees in the car parking areas, more accessible pedestrian connections to adjacent streets and paths, including some with universal access, much more varied and colourful landscaping at the main entrance to the precinct of Yildeen Road, more windows and architectural features to a variety of buildings, and the co-location of the gym and other specialty tenancies adjacent to the childcare centre, so like facilities were co-located. If approved, this development is intended to proceed to construction very shortly, providing immediate economic activity to the area and assisting in building out the district centre to its full potential. We fully support the City's recommendation, option 1, to approve the development, and we're also fully supportive of all the conditions that have been put forward by the administration. We're very grateful for the collaborative attitude and workings with the City officers that we have, including Phil Russell, who's behind me, and the ability for us to work together to resolve the issues which were brought up during the design review process. So thank you, and I'll be very happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr Morrison. Questions, councillors. Councillor Coley.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the presentation, and yes, I'm glad the trees were picked up because it looks very barren as the pictures show, but they were small trees at the moment. But yeah, if you could make it a little bit more greener and get some shade happening for people parking in the area, that'd be great. I'm just concerned about the access egress to the side off Yildeen. Do you see a need for traffic lights there in the future? Particularly exiting, once you cross over one side of Yildeen, you're straight into the traffic. I'm just concerned about the egress of the site. I wondered if that could be looked at, or whether it's in your hands to do that or not.
Sure, thank you. Firstly, with the trees, yes, I think the rate in the activity centre plan is 1 per 4 car parking bays, and we exceed that rate now following those changes. With respect to traffic, a traffic report was supplied at the time of DA lodgement and updated to reflect the small changes which we made following the design review process. The findings of that report is that the network functions satisfactorily and safely. The arrangement of the intersections and which intersections have traffic lights and the like have been resolved during the district structure planning process as well as the activity centre planning process, all of which had their own supporting technical traffic reports as well. And all of those previous structure plans, including the activity centre plan, all anticipated similar development to what's being proposed at the moment along this strip along Yildeen Road. So they have anticipated whether that's required or not. And in short, the conclusion was that intersection as proposed can function safely.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr Morrison.
Thank you.
Takes us now to item 4.7, the proposed change of use restaurant to tavern, lot 211, number 2931 West Swan Road, Caversham, and Mr Gino Manchetti. When they eventually come in. Okay, Mr Manchetti, I assume that's you on the end. You've also listed Miss May Dunlop as attending. Which one of you is presenting? Okay, so Miss Dunlop, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Thank you, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, members of the Council. We're here today regarding our application for a proposed change of use from restaurant to tavern. Reason being requests from patrons to be able to be served an alcoholic drink over the counter, whereas they can then go be seated, whereas they can then go and be seated whilst reviewing the menu or catching up with friends or family. For people to be also for people to be able to stand while drinking and moving around the restaurant, particularly during functions, private events and large family gatherings. Further details are listed in the proposal regarding the increased patronage, landscaping, car parking and traffic management, all of which can be effectively and safely mitigated with all the solutions mentioned in the report. Implications and concerns regarding antisocial behaviour and possible change of the culture and business structure have been noted. We do not intend on changing the vibe or culture of the restaurant. We want to maintain the vibrant family restaurant feel for which we are renowned. We are very proud of what the restaurant has grown into. We want to continue giving our customers the best service and will ensure to keep it the popular, enjoyable family restaurant that is synonymous with the vibes of a family day out amongst the vines, part of what the Swan Valley is about. After discussing the details with liquor licensing, it was they that recommended a tavern licence would successfully tick the boxes of what we are trying to achieve. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms Dunlop? Councillor Coley.
Thank you. Through you again, Mayor. Just this idea of grassed overflow area. I note that at the front of the property you currently have fake grass. I personally have a problem with that in the Swan Valley in particular. Are you proposing that there be fake turf grass in the grassed overflow area, or are you looking to put in real turf?
Sorry, could I pass that on to Gino to answer?
Yep, if he's a better place to answer that.
We put shade cloths on top because one of the problems with that is the heat.
Overflow parking, you're talking about? Yeah. The overflow car parking?
Yeah.
That's what they're referring to.
There's overflow grassed area.
The grassed overflow area.
Right. Well, it's got a road base underneath it. We can always take it out. It's not a big deal.
I'm sorry, I'm not too sure if you understood the question. It was, are you looking to put in fake turf grass or real grass?
We currently put fake grass there now.
Okay.
There's cars that sit on there, it's not big.
Right, okay, so we're looking at fake grass.
For car parking, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Parry.
I don't want to make a question, I just want to thank them for the support they gave through the fire as well, giving free meals out to the emergency staff. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no further questions. Thank you very much. Now move to item 4.8, the proposed change of mixed-use development, recreation, private, fast food outlet, childcare premises at lot 8336, number 151, the Promenade, Allenbrook. And Mr Reese Hendy from Planning Solutions speaking support of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr Hendy. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Good evening. I'm Reese Hendy, Senior Planner from Planning Solutions. I tend to be brief today. I know we've got quite a full agenda. I act on behalf of the proponent for item 4.8, the proposed mixed-use development at the former Masters Home Improvement Facility. This site has remained unoccupied since Masters commenced closing their stores in 2016. And it's only in recent months that Spudshed and Spotlight have gone into the building, which has brought some business and a degree of activation back to the site. The application before us today seeks to change the use of the remainder of the building, facilitate various commercial, recreational and large format land uses to service the vicinity and the residents which surround. The proposal demonstrates an efficient and adaptive reuse of the building and will contribute further to activating the site. I don't have much more to say, but lastly I'd like to thank the City's planning staff for their assessment of this application. We have reviewed the recommendation for approval and do not have any objections to the conditions of approval. We hope you will next week approve the development, and I must thank you for your time over this week and next week. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Hendy. Questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr Hendy. Now move to item 4.9, additional fill to existing sand pad at lot 9693 Liberté Crescent, Baskerville. The first speaker is Mr Mike Marsh against the recommendation. Thank you, Mr Marsh. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. Could I hand around some photos for people to have a look at?
Would someone like to grab those? Yep.
I'll come to those in a moment, Mr Mayor. The planners, when they were looking at this proposal, proposed that the current construction presented as a small rural dam. Now, in that vicinity there are many small rural dams, hardly noticeable. The difference between a small rural dam and this construction is that the small rural dam is at the bottom of the slope, not at the top of the hill. So the dams that are there now disappear into the valley as opposed to shining out from the top of the hill. The other aspect they made a point of was that the lot size is 4.6 hectares. The lot number is a 9,000 number. So this particular lot is clearly planned for further subdivision, and this structure will then sit on lot 621, which is somewhat smaller than 2 hectares, not near 5 hectares. The other issue that the planners seem not to have looked at was the Joshua Mews structure plan. This plan was prepared by the applicant and others, and the applicant was a beneficiary of the proposals within that approved structure plan. The structure plan was approved in January 2015. It requires the rear setback to be 30 metres. I note that the document does not refer to the setback, specifically to the setback on this particular area, but my best guess is that it's a little bit less than 20 metres, maybe somewhere around 18. That is not so. As it's currently designed and constructed, it's not in compliance with the Joshua Mews structure plan as approved by the Planning Commission. Now, I want to go over a bit of the history, if I may. This used to be lot 505. The shed that's constructed on 9693 currently was constructed without council approval. Retrospective approval was required when council officers arrived to look at a pit and noticed that a shed had been constructed. Likewise, the first stage of this construction also required retrospective approval. And now this second stage, for a third occasion, requires retrospective approval. One wonders why one should follow the rules. Under normal circumstances, one has to wait for council approval, and then there's a whole series of other conditions put in place. For instance, limiting the height of the retaining wall. And if you look at those photos I passed around, you'll notice that all of them have had a limitation on the height of their retaining wall. So the question becomes, why follow the rules? Why listen to the council? It's much easier for years afterwards to come and say it's too hard to change. On the photos that I sent around, you'll notice that the highest retaining wall is somewhere just over 2 metres, less than 3 metres.
Yeah, 1 minute left, Mr. Marsh.
Sorry?
Yeah, 1 minute left.
Right, and that's quite clearly shown in that last photo where they've actually terraced into the building. This structure has no cut, just fill, and therefore it finishes up with a 7.5 metre high pile of rocks. Now bear in mind that when the subdivision was taking place, landscaping was required to hide houses in this vicinity. But here we have a 7.5 metre high wall with a house to go on top. Now I just add that if I don't want to have the prospect of a State Municipal Tribunal review influencing your decision making. I think that's something that might happen or might not happen, as the case may be, but I don't think that costs, and as mentioned in the planner's document, I don't think that should influence the decision at all, because I'm quite familiar with SAT and I know what goes on. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marsh. We take questions at the end of the item, so I'll now ask Ms. Roberts, who's the owner, support of the recommendation. Thank you. Ms. Roberts.
Yeah, good evening.
You have 5 minutes too.
Mr. Mayor and councillors. First of all, thank you very much to the officers of the city for the time they've put into preparing this comprehensive report, and I thank them for their approval. And Mr Marsh's statement that we didn't get approval for the shed is totally untrue, and your Shire records will show that, because it was a company from Geraldton that erected the shed and they got all of the approval, so I don't know where he got that from, but you will be able to check that out. I don't really even know why I'm here. We got the approval in 2006 for our house pad. Since that time, Graham was fined for that because it was a retrospective approval. Since that time, the only thing that's happened on that house pad, to the best of my knowledge, is that Bruno Yarkis's big roller was parked up there for years, and we did actually use it to compact the pad. That is all that I can ever say happened since that approval. We didn't do anything else to it. I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Ms Roberts. Councillors, any questions of either presenters? No? Thank you both. Okay, councillors, we have no one here for item 4.10, but you've received written comments from Ms Barbara Dundas, and also no one here for 4.12. That takes us now to 5.2, the proposed construction of Henley Brook Avenue, Nangarra Road to Reed Highway. And there are a number of deputations. You've received a written deputation from Jacob Martin from Cardno and also from Peter Fitzgerald from Urbis. And the first presenter, when they all come in, Councillor Henderson's leaving the room, will be Ms Ruth Verrier. It's got an interest in proximity. Thank you, Therese. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm guessing you're all on council because you're passionate community people, so I'll run with that. I live on Garran Loop in Morganfields, directly facing onto Henley Brook Ave. And my little castle faces beautiful bushlands and stables we bought there for that reason. And tree-lined streets, obviously. And I've sent emails to councillors already, and I sincerely hope that you've read them and just not acknowledged them. But basically, my objection, which was noted in the request for comment, I distributed to 540 houses on your behalf, kindly. My family and I walked them around because it's an important issue to us. So we don't believe Henley Brook Ave should be a dual carriageway any further than Nangarra Road, which is an important note. Obviously, people need to get out of the new areas. But any further than that, I don't think is required since the ridiculous 1994, 1996, 2009 investigations into the road. We've had John Pellias Road, dual carriageway, Tonkin Highway extension has gone through. Both of those are fantastic and take the majority of the traffic. And the data that was used to collect to decide that this should be a key road is outdated and proven by your Office of the Auditor General to be unreliable. So at a minimum, you should be reviewing on an ongoing basis whether these things are still required before you spend council money and community money on these things. So I think all of these should be reassessed on an ongoing basis. Accessibility to Morgan Fields. This change to the road will effectively lock us into our estate, which is exactly what happened before Tonkin Highway and the extension at the top of Ellenbrook happened. So it would take me 15 minutes just to get out of our estate because there was no exit onto Nangara Road. When we moved there, it was single lanes everywhere you went. It'd take me an hour to get to work. It's ridiculous. But this accessibility to Morgan Fields would effectively mean we're shut into our estate, surrounded by dog box properties coming up behind us, with no view to any of the residents who currently live there. As for the future developments, I'm not opposed to them necessarily. I think they're too small. But anyway, I don't want them dogtailing through our estate. Why would we want that? As a resident, why would you want that next to your house? People are going to be driving through our estate, ploughing over our properties, and it's just not necessary when there's already existing roads. Not to mention ruining the amenity of the area.
Okay.
We moved there.
Thank you, Ms. Ferreira. That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. I hope you read my
Thank
email.
you. You might have questions later. Okay, next speaker is Ms. Nikki Gill.
Hello, thank you. I'd like to voice my objection to item 5.2 based on the following reasons. First of all, is it necessary? Henley Brook Avenue was reserved in the late 90s because Lord Street was supposed to be part of the Perth-Darwin Highway. However, Tonkin Highway North got put through, the MRS changed. Why was Henley Brook Avenue not downgraded when the MRS was changed? Extending Henley Brook Ave from Nangara Road to Reid Highway basically just duplicates Drumpellier Drive again. Drumpellier Drive has been quite empty since Tonkin Highway North was installed. So why would we do another 4-lane duplication of a road that's 2 to 3 kilometres away? It just makes no sense and the cost is ridiculous. I do completely support Councillor Kiley's motion that this needs to be reassessed, traffic assessments need to be done, and also it needs to be taken into consideration that we're getting a railway line which is going to reduce the traffic again. So according to the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, regional roads are principally for through traffic movement to reduce traffic in residential areas. Other roads in the area, Tonkin Highway North connects to Brand Highway, Great Northern Highway. Drumpellier Drive connects to Tonkin Highway North and the Ellenbrook Shopping Centre. West Swan Road connects to Great Northern Highway. Henley Brook Avenue connects to residential Ellenbrook. It doesn't connect to another highway. If you go down Millendon Road, it's a residential road. Where is this road connecting the traffic to? You're going to have 7 lanes of traffic merging onto Reid Highway, which is 2 lanes. The other direction, you're going to have 7 lanes of traffic merging onto Nangara Road, which is 1 to 2 lanes. On top of that, as Ruth stated, it totally locks in the residents of Morgan Fields. We've just had bushfires. We had people in Morgan Fields evacuating. We won't be able to get out. We're going to be locked in. I also have concerns about how it's going to link to Reid Highway, and I think all further work south of Nangara Road should be halted until we have a design of where it's going to link in with Reid Highway, especially with the grade separation. We also want to bear in mind that to put these 4 lanes through, we are taking people's private property, we are taking a large area of a Bush Forever block, and I think this council wants to be really, really sure this road is definitely needed before you inconvenience people like this. Furthermore, Henley Brook Avenue will not reduce the traffic on West Swan Road. West Swan Road has been touted as the Swan Valley. The development on West Swan Road for tourist attractions, eateries, has gone mad. There are people going down West Swan Road all weekend.
Thank you, Ms Gill. That's your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker on this item is Ms Cheryl Rogers. Thank you, Ms Rogers. You have 3 minutes also.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors and Mr Edwards. I fully endorse Ruth and Nikki's comments. I'm an affected landowner. I own land which, under the 2020 Swan Valley Planning Scheme, is all within the Swan Valley and is predominantly priority agriculture. This road takes about 5 hectares of our 17 hectares. Yet I find that my submission was slashed to 7 dot points and tacked on to the end of my husband's separate and independent submission. Our daughter's submission also appears to be missing in action. She was given written confirmation that it would be included in the report, but it isn't there. Now, our daughter and her husband are the 4th generation of our family to occupy and co-farm this property. It's been in the family since 1947. Both our daughter and son-in-law were born after 1994, hence they had no opportunity to comment then. I ask the wider audience listening, has anyone else been excluded, or is our family getting special treatment? Ours is not a hobby farm. It grows 1,100 civic trees representing 30 plus species. These are destined to put canopy and shade into the Perth region, mitigation against urban hotspots. Since 1919, successive generations of our family has and continues to grow fresh food, trees, and we buy and employ locally, as well as creating rural ambience. City of Swan rates on this property alone in 2019 were $14,800. This so-called public comment letter shoots holes in any claim that the city's strategic community plan prioritises community engagement and the natural environment. It was not on the public record, never on the website. Key stakeholders, including the Urban Bushland Council, were not on the mail-out. The map attached to the report has omitted the obvious, as the former speakers have commented, Drumpelia Drive. It was neither highlighted nor labelled. Transport Minister Saffioti tells us she's keen to interrogate forthcoming traffic modelling to see whether this road is needed in light of the new infrastructure to the west and the coming rail. If traffic volume on West Swan Road is the big issue, drop the speed limit to 60 k's per hour. The Banksia Woodland community has since 2016 been recognised as nationally significant. This community is represented throughout Bush Forever Site 200 and is immediately behind the APA gas metering station. Will ratepayers bear the cost of moving this infrastructure at the gas metering station and the classroom next door? The road goes right between them. Given the overwhelming community concern, I respectfully request that you support Councillor Kiley's proposal and extend this to proper community consultation and public meetings. From our experience, it would be unwise to rely on the questionable professionalism of some of your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Rogers. The next speaker is Mr Harry Gratt.
Evening, Mayor and Councillors.
3 minutes.
I'm also on Henley Brook Avenue. I also support Andrew Kiley's motion to fully investigate both the need and size of this road and its location. There's traffic modelling going to be done, we're told, by the City of Swan staff, and that'll be completed in December this year. So nothing should be happening between now and December this year until we've had a chance to see and interrogate the traffic modelling. As you've heard, it needs to obviously include all the new roads and the train line. I was very disappointed with the the staff report. The whole thing, and even the recommendation, all reads like this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. No, it's not happening. It's up for review, please. And I think you've got a lot of strength here. You sent out 95 letters. You failed to put it on your website, and you've got over 100 objections. I mean, that's hitting the jackpot. I don't think you've ever done that before, and let's hope it never happens again. The road in your report says it does not enter the Swan Valley. If you go to the August 2020 Swan Valley scheme, Henley Brook Avenue is fully within the Swan Valley. In other words, it's got the Swan Valley on both sides of it, from Harrow Street to Reed Highway. Your submission on that Swan Valley Swan Valley scheme did not call that out. So obviously you're happy with that. This road should not go through the Swan Valley. You're going through a Bush Forever site. This is bad planning. might have been all right in 1994, but not in 2021. You don't divide a bush forever site. You find an alternative. And if you do divide it, then it's going to cost you millions for under and overpasses for wildlife. You can't just charge through. The Swan Valley is a destination, and that's really important, and it must have a ring road where you get on it and you go round it. It's pretty logical. This plan terminates West Swan Road at Reed Highway. So, got to help the tourists. Now, the APA gas pipeline, above ground gas metering station, is right by the proposed Harrow Street roundabout. And in your officer's report, you've actually paid APA for the risk assessment. They didn't say paid, but commissioned, I think was the word. So you're paying for it. And the suggestion was a bollard system. Now, if you've got a high pressure above ground natural gas pipeline station, you're going to put a bollard system in. That has to stop a 50-tonne, fully loaded truck and trailer doing 80 kilometres an hour. Now, that's technically feasible.
Thank you, Mr. Gratt. It's your 3 minutes. Thank you. Well, you're going to eat into some question time, councillors, because I was just about to say, given that we've had 4, I'll just set aside 5 minutes of questions of any of the presenters so far, if you've got questions.
Thank you, and disappointed, Kevin.
Any questions of the 4 presenters so far, councillors? Councillor Crowley?
Through you, Mayor, to you, Mr. Gratt, just the bollard system. Could you explain a little bit more about the need for how that would work and the study we're paying for?
Well, you'd have to pay for something that would stop a 50-tonne truck that's going around a roundabout and something goes wrong, and right next to the roundabout is an above-ground natural gas pipes with pipes this big full of compressed gas. So it's going to have to stop that truck, but it's got to do better than stop the truck. You get the freak accident where something does flip, and we've seen that on the train line to Mandurah. We've had cars on that. That was safe. If that happens and the gas goes up, you then have to go 3 kilometres up the road and turn the valve off, and it'll flare until that line is empty.
Councillor Calano?
Yes, thank you. Did you have any other things that you thought were important to let us know about, other than the things that you've already raised?
The roundabout also goes immediately past my irrigation infrastructure. I'm 20 metres off it. And again, a single accident on the roundabout wipes out my farming enterprise. I lose my bore, electrics, everything. And I'm going to require some structures to protect that. But that's just something to kill people on. I'd rather avoid that.
Okay. One other question, yep.
When it comes to the road going through the Bush Forever site, sort of what kind of, do you imagine what kind of structures will be required to, so that wildlife can actually, there's like a corridor between the two?
Well, there are over or underpasses, and you'll see them on Tonkin Highway. A proper overpass will cost you over $1 million. That'd be the start. You're building an overpass, and the Arthur Street overpass cost you $9 million. So let's do a couple for wildlife through Bush Forever site 200. You're talking millions. You try and do it with underpasses, and that area, the underpasses will flood in winter, so they'll be seasonal.
Thank you, Mr. Gratt. Councillors, any questions of any other presenters? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gratt. Okay, the next speaker on this is Ms. Zan. When we get them all in, will be Ms. Jan Zek. Thank you, Ms. Zek. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. You will see from the handout that I gave out that the only real opportunity for input on the Henley Brook Avenue was in 1994. Every other so-called opportunity presented the road in a piecemeal fashion, not as not as the entire route, not in the regional context. It is hard to reconcile our experience with the statement, "There was considerable consultation." Environmental studies since 1994, the Caversham Air Base, 2 in 1994, 1996, 2000, 2016, recognise the significance of this bushland and the geology, including wetlands and waterways that support it. Swan Valley Act 2020 intends that this area goes from parks and recreation to conservation. So there has been a steady consolidation over the last 3 decades of this area's environmental significance. And yet, Henley Brook Avenue is intended to go right down the middle. The intention is to put 2 east-west roads through the Bush Forever site to connect to Henley Brook Avenue. So that makes it 3 roads through there, not just 1. The result, 4 smaller parcels, not the one Bush Forever site. This fragmentation is the very thing the Bush Forever program was supposed to prevent. It seems only situations which justify the road are included in the report. Have you been to Brabham lately? Hardly a tree left standing, a sea of roofs. My friend who flies a light plane over the area said that there is such an updraft from the heat rising off the houses that the plane is sucked up in the thermals. This is a heat sink. Hard surfaces exposed to the sun create dramatically higher temperatures than the areas where vegetation shades the ground. The Council talks about sustainable growth in its strategic community plan, but how can this be achieved when these homes will need air conditioning 24 hours a day in summer just to make them habitable? I would urge you to put aside the officer recommendation and entertain the idea that the Henley Brook Avenue concept needs to be workshopped within the Swan Valley community to ensure that the issues we by default are left to raise are addressed. At the very least, please support Councillor Carley's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Seck. The next speaker is Mr John Rex from the Swan Valley Tourism Association. Thank you, Mr Rex.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and the councillors. The Swan Valley Tourist Alliance is strongly opposed to the current planned construction of Henley Brook Avenue from Nangara to Reid Highway. The West Swan Road is the main tourist drive from Guildford through to Great Northern Highway. Along this route there are several significant historical sites, many tourist businesses and commercial agricultural enterprises that will be adversely affected by the road being realigned and the access in both directions being reduced or cut off. From a tourist perspective, if you're expecting visitors to successfully traverse the Swan Valley and appreciate the ambience that you need to keep them on the main arterial road in the Swan Valley, which is the West Swan Road. Expecting tourists to deviate from a tourist route via a major highway, then through suburban streets, and then back onto West Swan Road will be catastrophic for the tourist industry. The recognition of the Swan Valley Loop from West Swan Road, Great Northern Highway must be maintained. Many tourist initiatives have been developed over the years, with West Swan Road being the key point of reference. For example, all the tourism trails that have been developed by the city and by WA Tourist, they've been developed to provide visitors with the best experience and the most effective way of travelling the route for the trails that they have selected. If this new road goes ahead, all these trails will need to be revisited and redone, along with directional signage within the Swan Valley and other things as well. This is just a small example of the immediate impact that will have on tourist industry. The Swan Valley Tourist Alliance firmly opposes the Henley Brook Drive should only be constructed from Nangara to Yuldine, and that is in with discussion we've had with the Minister, with all roads between these being truncated on the east side, so nothing runs back to West Swan Road. Or, at a bare minimum, we have some traffic managements in place to encourage the commuter traffic from accessing this West Swan Road and rather being funnelled back to Drumpelia. I have one question, if I may.
Oh, seeing you're a nice fella. We'll see if we can answer for you.
Sorry, I'll let Mr. In your report, it states that this is a blue road. Am I correct? It says that in your report. It's a blue road, and the blue roads are the planning control lies with WAPC. Is that correct from this statement?
Can someone get a nod from
So
down the back?
it's the WAPC that will make a decision on this?
Yep. I'm getting heads nodding down the back. Is that right?
I was going to explain a little bit more in my presentation, but the purpose of the consultation was on the design of the road. It wasn't a planning consultation. So, as outlined in the report, there's been a number of consultations in relation to planning over many years. Under the Local Government Act, before local government builds a road in this situation, we're required to consult with properties in relation to the line and level of the road. So that was the intention of this consultation, notwithstanding a lot of the objections that have come back have actually been objections on planning related grounds rather than the actual design of the road. So the decision that the intent of the consultation was a decision made by this council in relation to the actual design of the road. But having said that, in terms of access and things like that, the Department of Planning are involved in those decisions as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does to a point. Our concern is the truncation of West Swan Road at Reid Highway, and yet there was no drawings provided in this document that was put out about Marshall Road to Reid Highway. There was nothing to show us what happened.
Thank you, Mr. Rex. Next speaker is Mr. Humphrey Bogart from the Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association. Thank you, Mr. Bogart.
Yep. The Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association rejects the proposal for the development of Henley Brook Drive because it adversely impacts on the Swan Valley as defined in the Swan Valley Planning Act 2020. The Swan Valley is a tourist precinct, and tourists need to have a smooth run, an appealing run through the valley to make their experience better. Complicated intersections as planned for Reid Highway, Henley Brook Drive and West Swan Road would interrupt this smooth drive. Some information based on what I gathered from talking to Main Roads. It is crucial to note that the traffic modelling for Henley Brook Drive did not consider the traffic of Arthur Street overpass or the 4-lane Drumpelier Drive. And they couldn't because the modelling was done before they were built. Main Roads plans to update this modelling in due course. The Main Roads software modelling software appears to be working well on major arteries, but as soon as you put local area information in there, it seems to be very inflexible. The Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association found it all very concerning that Main Roads, while aware of the Swan Valley Planning Act, totally ignores it in modelling. No doubt, traffic modelling is very complex. Maybe it's even an intractable problem. The concept of Henley Brook Drive, when it was conceived, probably made the assumption that people from Ellenbrook and surrounds would drive all to Midland. But now with a 4-lane Nangara Road towards Joondalup, a 4-lane Drumpelier Drive towards Morley, it's likely that people follow those directions and not going to Midland. The City of Swan should not accept the current available traffic information from the years gone. And the Swan Valley Ratepayers also suggest that any further modelling should be based on the 2021 census data, because that's very important. The other thing is that the road reserve for the Henley Brook Drive will cut off the northeastern tip of Panedge wetlands. In conclusion, based on the above information, the Swan Valley Ratepayers object to the construction of Henley Brook Drive because current plans are based on outdated and incomplete data. I have more information here and I will email it to all councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Bugart. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Zek, Mr. Rex or Mr. Bugart? Councillor Catalano, you're first.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about the east-west roads that Jan was referring to. Are you talking about Marshall Road? What were you referring to there?
No, in the one of the structure plans, and I'm sorry, I can't remember offhand what it is. It's one of the recent ones. It's proposed that the urban development that's going to be constructed on the Caversham Air Base will have two east-west roads that connect through the Bush Forever site into Henlybrook Avenue. So you must have documents within the council where you can have a look at that, but that's where I found it.
And you think they're going to go through the Bush Forever site?
They do. They show that they go through there.
Okay. All right, thank you for that one. And then just getting back to the wetlands that you referred to. Sorry, what can you give us the exact location? You know when you send your email?
It's actually not on there. It is just it's just south of Park Street.
South of. Would you mind sending me a map when you do your email?
I'll include it in what.
Yeah, just circle it. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Yeah, and just wanted to ask Mr. Rex about the. What were you referring to when you were talking about WAPC? Now you're under the. What was it that you were thinking about?
The question I asked was whether WAP has a final say on this.
Whether have and did you think that? And did you think that you got an answer to that? Because I'm not sure if I did.
I think you did. Yeah.
You did, and what's your impression of that?
Yes, the city has
they have the final say in the design and the construction. That's what you believe? Yeah, okay. So in the design, is that what you're referring to?
The city will have input.
Mr. Coaten, but you're presenting on this.
400 and what?
Yeah, it is a Blue Road. The Department of Planning have planning authority of it, but the detailed design and construction are decisions for the City of Swan.
Councillor Kiley.
Mr. Rex, if I could, would you mind coming to the microphone, John, just so we can all hear you?
Yep.
And you're being recorded too, so we want to have this on the record.
Yep.
Just your comments about it's surprising. The reason for having a Henlybrook Avenue extension is to take traffic off West Swan Road. That's the argument being presented to me. But you're saying that you want the traffic on West Swan Road, and from a tourism perspective,
From a tourist perspective, yes, but we don't want the commuters' traffic.
Right.
They're using it as a rat run, or as the charrette, which was run in 1997, used a term called it a sewer. It just funnels traffic from one end to the other. We don't want that on West Swan Road at all. And I don't think there's, as was pointed out by other speakers, there's not enough statistics about Drumpelia yet, because Drumpelia was never in the mix until about 3 years ago. Full laning of it.
And we also heard from another speaker who suggested we take the traffic speed down on West Swan Road to 60 kilometres an hour.
Great idea.
So you'd support something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
We actually approached our local member to reduce the speed on Great Northern Highway, but we're told by Main Roads, no, the road's built to take that speed, so that's it. So we were looking at that as well.
Thank you. No other questions to the three speakers? Thank you all. Councillors, the next item is item C1.6, proposed kangaroo relocation sanctuary, and the speaker here is Miss Anne-Marie Denny in support. Thank you, Miss Denny. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor and councillors, this deputation is in support of Councillor Kiley's proposed kangaroo relocation sanctuary. It is hoped that it will give you some insight regarding the situation we are currently facing in Henlybrook and West Swan. My family and I have lived in the Swan Valley for the past 21 years, residing on 5 acres in Henlybrook. We chose to live here for the lifestyle it afforded us, living in a rural environment and yet still close to our places of work just outside of the city. We felt ourselves to be incredibly fortunate, surrounded by trees and wildlife, peace and quiet, part of a small, friendly and cohesive community who for the most part chose to live in the area for the same reasons as us: lifestyle, agriculture, viticulture and equestrian activities. It has been devastating in recent years to see the amount of change encroaching on our rural environment with the creation of Brabham, an expansive, low-cost housing development on small blocks. We are now seeing the development of further subdivisions to create high-density housing in what was an area of native bush, grassland and wetlands, all home to a large population of native animals: kangaroos, bandicoots, echidnas, lizards, snakes, red-tail and white-tail black cockatoos and numerous other species of birds. Property developers have been responsible for destroying hectares of land, tearing up every tree and blade of grass, covering wetlands, which in the 21 years I've been in Henley Brook have never run dry, and in the process killing and displacing numerous species of wildlife whose habitat has been replaced with sand and a sea of houses. It is clear from the appalling situation we now find ourselves in that there was no consideration given to the natural environment. If there had been, we would not be left with a large population of wildlife, predominantly kangaroos, which have nowhere to go, insufficient food to eat, and inadequate waterholes to sustain them. A development which had given due consideration to the environment would have incorporated nature reserves, preserved crucial wetland areas, and put a wildlife relocation program into place before the very first bulldozers arrived. Now we have hundreds of kangaroos lining the verge of busy local roads to obtain food, and as a result being hit by passing traffic, with at least one kangaroo killed every 24 hours. Many of these animals are seriously injured and must be shot by local wildlife groups, who are then faced with the significant cost of hand-rearing and rehabilitating any surviving joeys. While this is unacceptable from a humane perspective, there is also the cost to residents for repairs to motor vehicles and the very real possibility that we will see a serious accident or fatality. On a personal level, I've been forced into taking action to try and repair the harm which has been caused by the actions of the property developers. This is a mess not of my making, and to ignore the gross destruction which is happening right in front of me would be unconscionable. I am unable to travel along sections of Walcott Avenue with my daughter, as she has been so badly traumatised by seeing kangaroos hit by cars. For an 8-year-old to feel this way and to be devastated by seeing what is happening to our environment is difficult to accept. She understands the environmental catastrophe unfolding in front of her. She understands the science of habitat destruction, extinction and global warming, and yet despite our knowledge and the irrefutable evidence before us from global experts, we are doing exactly what we should not: destroy habitat, kill its wildlife, fill in wetlands which are crucial to our groundwater and river systems, and replace them with concrete, bricks and fake lawn, and a tidy profit to line the property developers' pockets. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I hope that together we can make a positive difference which benefits the community of the Swan Valley, the environment and its precious wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Denny. And Councillors, you would have received a written deputation of Ms Denny. Don't go anywhere, you might have questions. Any questions of Ms Denny, Councillors? Councillor Congerton.
Hello, Ms Denny.
Hi.
Can you tell me, have you had any communication at all with the state government in relation to the issues we're facing with the relocation of kangaroos on WAPC land and or any other piece of land in Brabham?
Yes, we've had tried repeatedly to contact Rita Safiotti and have had very little response.
Sorry, further question. When you say very little response, any positive response?
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Parry. No? Okay. Any further questions, Ms Denny? Thank you, Ms Denny. Now go to item C1.8, which is actions to address displaced kangaroos, West Swan, with two deputations. The first is Mr Eric Purvis.
Good evening again,
You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to. The other speaker spoke eloquently about the need to do something about this issue, and they certainly encapsulated the feelings of the local community. But I'd like to make some comment in relation to the officers' comment that they've come back on Councillor Zanino's motion. They say that the developers have done a survey, and they've had a look at and undertaken an assessment, and that there is adequate food and water sources within the site south of Yuildene Road, with feedback that it's suitable for them. One would have to ask the question, if the food and water was so plentiful, then why do the Roos bother to move north to an area of land that has got no water, no food and lots of noisy machines, resulting in their impending death? No self-respecting kangaroo would have enough a lack of intelligence that it would move away from food and water and move to somewhere where there is none. That makes no sense, so we can dispute that one, that they've done this report, because the report is obviously untrue. We've looked at the site, some other residents have been on the site and looked at it, and the water there is terrible. The officers then say that the kangaroos displaced to Pete's Land between Yuildene Drive and Wilcott Avenue is planned to be relocated back to the site south of Yuildene Drive, from where its relocation can be managed. I must admit, I found that somewhat amusing. So what we're saying is that what about the kangaroos that are north of Wilcott Avenue? Where do they go, and who's responsible for them? We're not talking about them at all. And the kangaroos have not been displaced to Pete's Land because the kangaroos can't read. They don't know who owns what land. All they know is where the food and the water is. So they're going to just travel around to suit themselves. So they can't seriously be suggesting that somebody's made a concerted effort to put kangaroos from government land onto Pete's Land. That's a nonsense. So let's get rid of that one. They just care about food. So it really is quite a simple matter that all we need to do, if we had the guts to do it, would be to say to the developers, don't do any more work on the site anywhere until such time as you've arranged the transport to move the Roos to a more acceptable place. And I understand that there is an offer from a person out in Tujay that's got an expanse of land that's quite happy to take them, but that's something for another matter. Then they say, the officers say, for the relocation back to the site on the southern side of Yuildene Road, the road will have to be closed for a 24-hour period to allow the gradual, slow, less stressful relocation process. Peter's indicated that such process will be commenced soon. Again, this is incredibly amusing. So what we're going to have is a whole line of kangaroos sitting there waiting for 7 o'clock on a Monday morning where they're allowed to then cross the road. Don't be ridiculous. 24 hours isn't going to help, and it's certainly not going to make any difference to the kangaroos that are already north of Wilcott Avenue, because those kangaroos are going to get run over as they go across Wilcott, Murray Road and everywhere else they're travelling around. So according to the council's own statements, their vehicle movements are expected to be around 10,000 a day as the area grows, and a vast majority of that will be rat running through the back streets to Wilcott to West Swan Road. Sadly, we had a lot of this problem solved a little while ago when we had the motion to close Wilcott Avenue, and if we had done that at the time, a lot of these kangaroos would probably still be alive today, and there would be a little bit less hysteria about it. So I would urge councillors to support Councillor Zanino's motion and if need be, close the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Purvis. Just take a seat, thanks. The next speaker is Mr Grant Stewart from the Swan Valley Wildlife and Environment Advocacy Group. Supported the motion. Thank you, Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to support Councillor Zanino's motion, and I'd like to comment too on the officer comment to do with that motion, and that is about, as Mr Purvis just related to, the feed and water report. I have a copy of the feed and water report here. I've been through it. I'm an ex-valuer, and this report is anecdotal at best. It was done by the developers' employed consultants. There was no actual measurements of quality or quantity of food at all done, and there was no audit of the animals done. The officers conducting the assessment made incorrect assumptions, as they were not dressed properly on the day they carried out the report. I know this because I'm part of the stakeholders group. We have no confidence in the report, and we don't believe in the findings. We require an independent, proper assessment of audit by an independent party, and require the supply of witnesses to observe the carrying out of the assessment. We've had plenty of people observe those sites, and indeed the gas pipeline site and the WAPC site. There is no water and no food on those sites. Those kangaroos are having to come out every night and find food and water on Walcott Street and on Murray Road. They're getting hit. I've sent photographs to everyone, and the reason I've sent photographs before is because we're finding that there is a lack of information. You're not receiving it. The public sees the kangaroos hit by the cars, they call a wildlife person who shoots them, and there the information stops. So that's why we're supplying you with the information now, so that you're actually aware of what's happening in your area. And we'll continue to do that. It's not macabre. We just feel like you'd want to know what's happening right there. So that's what I wanted to say on that. And then I wanted just to talk, I've written all this out, but I don't know how much time I'm going to have, so I'm just going to talk off the cuff. I want to talk about the concept of dispersal, which is the process that Department of Biodiversity related to in one of the meetings at the stakeholders group with his kangaroos. Mr Purvis asked where they're going to go. They said they're just going to go further up Murray Road, and then they're going to develop that too, the developer said. And I asked the question, where are they going to go then? They said, well, they'll go across to the eastern side of Murray Road. So all those private residences between Murray Road and West Swan Road, they haven't been alerted yet, but they're going to get the kangaroos. Now, that's unconscionable. Dispersal works if there's somewhere to disperse to. We're at the end of the line for this concept of dispersal. It's unethical. There's no assessment made of trails, what food and water is available, and dispersal now, and to drive them back onto that bush forever site is a death sentence. And they want to do that. I asked them why they wouldn't allow food and water to be provided. The member from the DBCA as well as the environmental scientists both said if they have food and water, they might tend to breed more. So they want to starve them and they want to dehydrate them to stop them breeding. Now, the next round of photographs you guys are going to get, you'll find a lot of kangaroos that have been hit on Drumpelia in these roads actually have little pinky joeys lying on top of their bodies. They're already breeding, and if you corral them into these local sites and fence them in, they're going to breed more. So is it cruel to deny them food and water because you don't want them to breed? Absolutely. Where do we go from here? Who takes control of this? We want the developers. Self-regulation and these sorts of things does not work. We've got fantastic councillors here, a number of you we've spoken to, who are supporting these issues and are aware of these issues, and we thank you for that. But we want to know where we go. Councillor Congdon rightly pointed out, where's the state government in this? You know, like we're trying to get in touch with the Department of Environment. I'm hopefully going to have a meeting with the Minister or Chief of Staff after the elections are over. Department of Communities have written to us and said, don't worry, everything's taken care of on the Bush Forever site. There's a report that's been done. So we'll be writing to them to advise them we're not satisfied with that report, and we'll send them the report. So we'd implore you to please do something to help the wildlife, and this is going to extend through the Henley Brook and then further through the Swan Valley. We can't stop development, but we can do it more intelligently. We can do proper wildlife corridors, and we can do audits before we start any of these things to see who's there.
You've got
the
a minute left,
kangaroos are
Mr. Stewart.
visible.
You've got a minute left.
Thank you. The kangaroos are visible, but there are all sorts of other wildlife species. There are echidnas. I volunteer every week at least. I'm going there tonight again to feed the joeys, and my wife and I do that every week. We've been doing it for almost a year. I live in East Perth, and I come out here 2 to 3 times a week, and I tell you honestly, every time I get in the car and know I'm coming to the Swan Valley, I feel anxious. I start to tremble. I know what I'm going to see. The other night I picked up a few dead rabbits off the road. I go out sometimes to witness the kangaroos being shot, and it's horrendous because they're begging for their lives and they're crawling towards the shooter in the last moments of their life. If you could please help the situation. You don't. The state and nationally they believe the Swan Valley is not what it's becoming. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Stewart or Mr. Purvis? Councillor Congdon.
No, to you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. If the city was able to initiate a stakeholder forum to include the government representatives, the wildlife groups and the developers within this area, would you be a willing participant?
I would very much so, and I'd like to see the developers not chair the meeting. I think that we need an independent chair people. If the council could chair that, that would be most welcome. And I've shown up to 2 of these meetings. They're not pleasant because when you talk about stakeholders, everyone's got a different stake, and our stake looking for the wildlife is not the same as the other stakeholders. But we'd be very grateful for your suggestion there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it was prefaced with the city initiating a stakeholders group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Scanlon. Okay. don't fight over it. Councillor Richardson, you're first. Then.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, and thank you very much for sending out the email. And I appreciate the photos and understand why you put the photos together, which creates a more vivid a process of what's happening out there. Can I ask, in terms of those photos, what the different markings were in the different colours?
So what happens is there are two predominantly wildlife groups that are called. One Express Wildlife answers the call more than anyone else we know. She answers the call 24 hours a day. When they get there, they mark the kangaroos for a couple of reasons, just like when you see an abandoned car on the road and the police put a sticker on to say it's already been reported. They mark it for that, and they also mark it to say that the pouch has been checked. Oh, okay. I guess the different wildlife people, I think Express use yellow and green, and I think... yeah. Oh, no, sorry, I get what you're saying. It's not a table of that, it's just whatever paint they've got at the time, but they try and stick to their colours so that if someone says there's a kangaroo there with red paint on, then they'll know which wildlife group attended.
Councillor Scullin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting, and everyone in the City of Swan is aware of the problem with the kangaroos, and it's quite distressing for everyone, particularly the roos. And people are talking about, can we relocate the kangaroos? So my first question to you is, what's your opinion on what should happen to these kangaroos? Where should they go? What shall we do with them? And do you support sterilisation? What's your opinion?
Sure, I support sterilisation. Where should they go? There are a combination of factors there. You've got Bush Forever site. Rewild it, Put the food that they want to do. Put some water stations in there. A few tanks with a few water troughs with a tank with a hose where the water stops. So you're not going to waste water. Give them some water. Put sterilisation elements in the water so that they won't breed. Let them live their lives and breed out. Their relocation does work. There was an unfortunate situation in the suburb south of Baldivis. Now that was a series of events that were unfortunate, but there are many examples of very successful relocations, including some that have been done from Brabham. So relocation does work. We have to find sites for that. The state government should be participating in that. And those sites as well, if they're relocated kangaroos, you could have water stations for them with the sterilisation in them, and they could breed out. And that could go ongoing. So as each area has relocation problems, they're taken to a site like that, and they're allowed to live their lives, and eventually they won't breed. And so that could be ongoing. But you've got sites here as well that could be much better managed.
Thank you. A follow-on question, if I may?
Yep, one more question.
I'd just like to ask you about the other fauna present. You mentioned echidnas, but I can just think there must be a lot of different animals out there. What can we do about those?
Okay. Watership Down. Anyone read that book years ago? Okay. Fern Gully. We show those to our kids and we teach them that's how we need to be, but we don't behave like that. So a proper audit, the previous lady that spoke, Nikki Gill, has put a motion to the council yesterday that a proper audit's carried out, and we build wildlife corridors and we assess them properly. Do we want these animals to live amongst us? There are bandicoots, there are echidnas, there are all sorts of lizards, goannas, there are possums, there are birds, a whole variety of birds. We could do much better, and it doesn't have to wait. David Attenborough finally has written a new book and he's saying we're at a crisis. I think only 1/3 of the world left is now wilderness, and only 50 years ago it was 2/3. So we've done that in 50 years, and rewilding is an important issue. And another concept is we're going to lose a lot of the Nangara pine forest because of the developments going on there. The black cockatoos, that's a big feeding ground for them. We've got the whole of the north of Whiteman Park that we could rewild with native vegetation that doesn't take as much water as the pine trees, and that could provide future feeding grounds for those areas. We've got Whiteman Park there, and it's just being left lifeless there, but we could put some things in there, some water stations and other things, and monitor those better.
Thank you.
The last question from Councillor Richardson.
Just another quick question, Mr. Stewart. In terms of, say, interstate examples of the signage and speed signs and the alert signs, have we looked? We talked about this at council as an example of using that. In the meantime, you know, between now and talking to state government or environmental department about seeing about getting that type of signage to slow the traffic, and all those, you know, the big billboard signs that have the warning. Whether there would also be a short-term possibility.
That would be a great possibility on Park Road as well now as needed, because as Mr Purvis alluded to, with the ripping up of the north of Walcott Street and the filling in of all the water, every other day I was down there taking photographs, and just my heart was breaking, especially the other developer, not the one we didn't mention any developers' names anyway, but they filled in the whole of the water pond and just filled it in. Those kangaroos are now moving up Murray Road, so we've got a new impending crisis there, and we believe now every other day there's been a kangaroo having to be shot at the end of Yuildene Drive at the roundabout with Drumpellier, and we believe they're also moving from Yuildene into those sites. So signage, we need to, not just a picture of a kangaroo, we need to explain to people what happens to a kangaroo when it's hit. So an education program, they can't, see, people think they bounce off the cars, but they have a broken hip, they run a few metres, people drive on, they think they're okay, and then they lie down. And then
another question for you. Those signs
I
in
did
particular.
say that was the last question.
Oh,
so
just to add on quickly.
Okay, very short one and a short answer, please, Mr Stewart.
Sure.
Those signs would address the wildlife number to call at that point in time. They would be at the beginning, at the end of that signage period, or in between as well. So it's contact numbers, you know, assistance, and it would be an educational thing. But it's particularly got those flashing lights and/or warning signs coming up.
They'd definitely help.
Has that been talked about at all? Or
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Thank you, Mr Stewart. Thank you, Mr Purvis.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, that's all of the deputations. We'll now move on to presentations from staff. And the first one will be 4.1, the proposed amendment local scheme to insert development standards use special zone Elvira Chalets, and that would be Mr van der Linde.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this report was prepared in response to a council resolution of October last year, where the council requested the city to prepare further scheme amendment on this property to allow the development to follow the R40, a mix of R40 and R60 building standards as per the R codes. Now, what it essentially does is it will, how it's being prepared and what it will ensure is it will ensure that all buildings on the property will be set back 4 metres from Elvira Street, and that the buildings visible from Elvira Street will not be allowed to be higher than and present higher than 2 stories. It further ensures a setback on the southern boundary of 3 metres to ensure solar access to those existing properties to the south, and then for the northern and western boundaries of the property, the normal sorry, I just want to make sure here 2 metre setbacks will be applicable as per R40, and on the lower end of the site, they're not visible from Elvira Street. The buildings will be allowed to be 3 stories high. So that's essentially what the scheme amendment does.
Councillors, any questions of Mr van der Linde? Councillor Goley.
Through you, Mayor. The northern boundary, Mr van der Linde, you mentioned was 2 metres. That would abut a existing residential property, which is also R40. Is that correct?
The properties to the north is R60. It's a higher code to the north, and those are mainly 2-storey houses with the rear of the houses very close to the boundary. So those properties has got, they face north. They face to the other side. So it's the backyards of those properties that face this side. And the R40 allows for those side setbacks of 2 metres.
For the northern properties, you're saying 2 metres is.
The northern properties will have a setback of 2 metres as well.
But that goes to my point. They're most likely going to have a driveway down. Would that be correct, down the side? An access point via driveway to the rear of their properties. That would be the standard design, I would imagine, which would therefore set them back even further.
So the new development on the Elvire site, where the 2 metre setback will apply on the northern side, will possibly have a driveway along that boundary, which will mean that the buildings will then be set back further than the 2 metres. That's correct.
On the Elvira side or the properties to the north?
The properties to the north are all developed, and it's those new developments within the Vivash development of the MRA, the MRA development. So there's houses that's not 10 years old constructed on the site to the north.
Councillor Kelano.
Thank you. What do you think the maximum height is for 2 stories and maximum height for 3 stories?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of the R codes, the indicative overall building height in metres for a 2-storey building is 9 metres, and for a 3-storey building is 12 metres. Now, the overall building height are set by adding together the floor-to-ceiling heights for the desired number of stories with a nominal allowance of 4 metres for the ground floor and 3 metres for subsequent floors. And it then adds at least 2 metres to the total to allow for the rooftop articulation. So essentially, if a story is 3 metres high, and then you can have the roof of 2 metres high on top of that. That's normally the indicative building heights in terms of the R codes.
Any further questions on this one, councillors? No? Okay, Leon, you go on to 4.2, which is proposed amendment 197 to local planning scheme 17 to a certain development standards, special use for Paradise Keys Retirement Village. Councillor Congren is leaving the room. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In a similar way, this report is a result of Council Resolution of October 2020. That resolution included that developers be informed of the 80-metre buffer along the swamp. What we found when we did the full assessment is that the best solution would be to subdivide that section of the 80-metre buffer that will impact the site, to subdivide that off from the site. So that's, if you look on the maps in the document, on the southeast corner, we propose for that 2,000 square metres or something to be subdivided off from the developable area of lot 501, and then for the lot to be developed in a way where on the northeastern boundary for a distance of 35 metres from that boundary, buildings only be allowed 2 metres or 2 stories, and also on the eastern boundary for the southern end of lot 501. And then within that 35-metre zone of where the 2-storey development's allowed, we propose a 6-metre setback from those houses, existing houses to the northeast, and further require that 6-metre zone to be a vegetated zone where there will be no parking and no driveways allowed. So that would deal with the impact on the residential area to the northeast and east. We further propose a 10-metre setback along Alexander Drive on the northern side of Paradise Keys to facilitate the retention of the existing trees on that site along that boundary, and have proposed a 6-metre setback along Alexander Drive to the south of Paradise Keys, which we believe is sufficient to facilitate future tree line along that section. We also propose a setback of 6 metres along Paradise Keys Drive. The reason for that was that if you consider that the rest of Ballajura and the residential area there, a 6-metre buffer is, a 6-metre setback is also applied, so garages essentially have to be 6 metres in from a street boundary. So that's in line with what you've got in Ballajura. And then further, the 6 metres is also representative of the design that was done by Southern Care initially,
had their buildings, even at that higher density proposal, they had their buildings 6 metres in from Paradise Keys. So for the rest of the Paradise Key site, so outside that zone that I've mentioned where the buildings will be restricted to 2 stories, on the rest of the site it will be allowed to be 3 stories high.
Councillor McNamara, you indicated a question.
First of all, Mr Mayor, I just want to tell you that I'll be having an alternative motion for this particular item. And I just want to remind councillors and Mr Leon that item 2 on the last motion was to advertise for expression of interest and the development of the management aircare facility on the site with the zoning to be the maximum of R40 and R60. So my alternative motion will be that the zoning that's required for R40, R60 would be it, because this particular motion is requiring prospective developers to do a hell of a lot more than what the actual motion had originally planned. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on that one, councillors? Councillor Coley?
Through you, Mayor. Mr van der Linde, we had a speaker tonight talk about the 6 metre, 10 metre versus the 6 metre setback on the 2 lots. Would you mind answering that now? Because it was, at some point it was going to be a query to you as to what you think of the idea of having a 10 metre setback on the south side as well would be.
The reason for us proposing the 10 metre on the northern side is based on the existing tree line. So it's based on where the existing trees have been planted, so they're there. So on the southern side, my thinking on that was that a 6 metre setback would be sufficient to plant trees in, so you can plant the trees closer to the boundary, and it should facilitate a tree line along that boundary. So the northern one is wider as a result of where the trees have been planted.
Further questions? Just make right.
I can't understand exactly what Mr van der Linde is talking about, the exact spot about these tree lines. Where exactly on the map is this particular line?
Mr van der Linde?
Mr Mayor, if I can refer you to page 184 in the agenda. If you look on the western boundary along Alexander Drive to the north of Paradise Keys, you will see that there's a line of existing trees along there. So the 10 metre setback is to facilitate the retention of those existing trees on the site.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr van der Linde. With regard to the zoning 4060, is it possible to actually, without stipulating a 10 metre setback, is it possible to actually have the design codes to actually facilitate the zone codes, the zone requirements, and retain those trees?
Mr Mayor, if we do not specify the setbacks along Alexander Drive, under the R codes, for an R60 development, the minimum site or the minimum setback on a secondary street would be 2 metres. So that would be the standard under the R code. So if they have buildings then 2 metres away from that street boundary, it will meet the basic requirements of the R codes. So having said that, a design that if you design it and you consider all the aspects that impacts the design, you would probably get a design that is further back than that 2 metres, but theoretically the 2 metres will be the minimum, and if you really want, you would be able to get away with a building on that 2 metre setback line.
And finally, Mr Mayor, I won't dwell on this anymore, but again I'll go back to item 2, number 2 on the previous motion, which clearly states that the aged care facility on the site and go to for expressions of interest with a zoning of R40, R60. It doesn't actually ask us to embellish on that. It just asks us to go out for expressions of interest on R40, R60. Full stop. Now, I personally, Mr. Mayor, want to retain those trees. I don't want to see those trees go. But the main issue is that we are now reducing the value of that land way so badly that it won't be viable for anybody to actually build.
You got a question there, John? Or is this the basis for your alternative motion?
It possibly is a reason for it.
Better keep your powder dry, John. Thank you. Any last questions, councillors? Okay, Leon, if you can carry on with 4.10, which is the demolition of the existing house and construction of a new single house at number 12 Meadow Street. We'll call Councillor Congleton.
Through Mr. Mayor, happy just to take questions on this item.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Russell on that one? Yeah, 410, yeah. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Russell, I'd just like to ask you about the sugar gum trees on the verge. So we received a submission from Barbara Dundas stating that the trees would be at risk because of their age, and should the construction material be loaded onto the verge, then the trees could, damage the trees. Can we put a condition on the development that no construction waste or sand or anything else be placed on the verge throughout the development period?
Through Mr. Mayor, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Russell. And now we go to 5.2, which is the proposed construction of Henley Brook Avenue. It's Mr. Coaten.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. 5.2 was the only one of my reports with deputations. It is a complex issue, and there's a lot of different aspects to it that are going on at the moment. So what we're recommending is that all of those actions be brought together into one report. So the deputations, the grade separation, the previous resolution in relation to traffic modelling from Walcott Avenue. So rather than have a series of reports come back to council, what we're recommending is that they all come back, they all be combined into one action. So the original plan for this section was to build it from north to south, and the main reason for that was because we were uncertain about the design for the tie-in at the grade separation of West Swan Road and Reid Highway, has been mentioned by a couple of the deputations tonight. So that was the original plan, so we did consultation on that, starting from the north to the south to get some consultation. So that would be one report to council, the feedback that we got from that consultation. Main Roads recently announced the grade separation of West Swan Road and Reid Highway. And the section of West Swan Road heading north is designed to tie into Henley Brook Avenue. But the detailed design of that is uncertain at the moment, so we're talking to Main Roads and Department of Planning into how that will actually tie in. So that's something that we need direction from council on, so that would be another report to council. As a result of the Main Roads announcement, there became a need for us to do consultation on that, because then we had to change our plans to construct from the south to the north. And the reason for that is the Main Roads have indicated that their project's aiming to be finished by 2023. So we don't have long to, if we have to do work to tie in there, we have to know what we're going to do and we have to get it done fairly quickly. So that became quite urgent. So the report on that consultation is another possible report to council. Council will remember, I think it was in October last year, there was a report on Walcott Avenue, the widening of Walcott Avenue. An alternative motion was put up to that, which requested additional traffic modelling in relation to Henley Brook Avenue. So that's a fourth report that we're working on at the moment. In addition to that, there's so the importance, as was highlighted actually by Mrs Gill and Mr Rex, the questions were asked about the design for the tie-in at the grade separation and why isn't that in the consultation, and it isn't in there because we don't know what it's going to be, so we need some direction from council in relation to that. last night, again, which occurred after we'd written the report, but there was a resolution at the annual electors meeting from Mr Purvis in relation to Walcott Avenue and Henley Brook Avenue as well. So that, you know, could potentially be a fifth report. Also on the agenda tonight is Councillor Kiley's alternate notice of motion on Henley Brook Avenue. So there's 6 reports on Henley Brook Avenue that we're looking at having to bring back. So what we're recommending is that they all, council essentially just bring them all into one. We have a briefing session on it. Council can provide some direction to staff on the designs and the timing and things like that. Then we can go out to community consultation on that. We can bring that community consultation back, and that will all be done in one report rather than doing 6. So that's essentially what we're trying to do. You know, a number of the issues that were raised in the deputations. When we, as I touched on in my answer earlier, the consultation that was done was to satisfy our requirements under the Local Government Act in relation to the road design, so the line and the level. It wasn't in relation to planning. But a number of the submissions that were made were, you know, had more of a planning focus, and that's not to say they should be discounted; they should be considered. But there has been a lot of the planning decisions have been made. So from when it was added to the MRS in 1994, and a number of reports have been through this council: the Albion District Structure Plan, Henley Brook Avenue, the Scheme Amendment 57, which identified the requirement for DCP collection for Henley Brook Avenue, an MRS minor amendment in 2017, and more recently the Henley Brook Local Structure Plan, which came to council, and the traffic modelling for that included Henley Brook Avenue in there. So there has been a lot of planning done. So the intent of the consultation wasn't in relation to planning; it was in relation to the design of the road. But having said that, a number of planning issues were raised. So for those reasons, we're recommending that it all be brought back into a briefing to council. All the questions that council have got can be addressed as part of there, but it is important that we get a council resolution in regards to the timing and the concept for Henley Brook Avenue. We can go out and do community consultation and bring that back to council. But we do need to have something reasonably soon, particularly as we're talking to Main Roads and Department of Planning about the tie-in at the southern end, which we need the council position on. So, yeah, so basically all those reports, rather than having 6 reports, we're recommending having 1.
Okay. Councillor Coley.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you, Jim, for that update. And if I can somehow amend the 5.1 or 5.2 to incorporate the considerations in my motion, then hopefully there's going to be no need for my motion at the end of the night. But you're talking about timing of the tie-in and the timing and concept only, as if it was to go ahead. I'm more interested in how we go about as a council, what steps we have to go through if we wanted to stop any grade separation flyover at West Swan Road and Reed Highway. I want to see the process laid out fairly clearly for all councillors to see what we would have to do. It's a blue road, WAPC has an involvement, but what we have to do as a council to stop what I personally think is, or to put a halt to, what I think is the wrong direction we should be going, you know, given all the changes. And the other thing too, could you tell me if Daviot Road was planned back in 1994 for that duelling that's occurred on Daviot Road as well?
Okay.
In 1994, that would have been the southern section of the Perth-Darwin Highway, because that originally followed the alignment of Drumpelia. So I'm not sure what was in 1994 for that. So,
but can you answer, Jim, in terms of the process? Is that something we can get made clear to council if we wanted to change it? Because personally, I'm not interested in the timing and the concept plans. That's just assuming we're going to go ahead with it. I'd like to see the option for something else, as mentioned by Mr. Rex tonight. Other plans on the table. I'd like to see a choice before council if we could.
Yeah, in relation to my comments in the concept plan, that was in relation to the tie-in to that project. It's not in relation to the actual project. So Main Roads are doing that project. I don't know if it would be possible to stop it. The funding's been announced, the project team's been appointed, design work's underway, and that's why we need to see where it's going to tie in. So that's not part of this report. We can. Yeah, I don't know how we could stop that project.
If I could, through you, Mayor, ask the CEO, if we could be given laid out clearly what the process is, whether we have to go to see the minister, how do we get an alternative set of plans on the table for us to consider? From discussions I've had with the community, they're speaking to their local member in Rita Safiotti. She seems willing to look at this and look at changes. Is that the right course of action we have to follow?
CEO, it's just ultimately, yes, it's Rita's.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. I mean, if that's the instruction from Council, we can go back to Main Roads and through the local member and ask that question and come back to you with a response.
Yeah, Councillor Lucas, I think I saw your hand up next.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, there are two items on Henley Brook Avenue. One is 5.1, which hadn't been mentioned all night until Councillor Kylie, you just mentioned 5.1 and 5.2. I just want to clarify that 5.1 is north of Nangara Road, and we've got $1+ odd $1 million waiting on grant funding, and I don't want to see any of that jeopardised. So I think we clearly need to delineate the difference between construction of Henley Brook Drive north of Nangara Road and south. South I haven't got an issue with to make further investigation, but I think we can't muck around with 5.1, councillors. Thank you, that's why I raised it. Thank you.
Councillor Parry, you're next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Coden, Mr Mayor. How long would a report take to go through all these issues that we've talked about tonight? How long would it take for you to deliver a report?
The time to actually write the report, I assume you're talking about the date of when it would come back to council.
Exactly.
Is that yeah?
Yes.
And all the actual writing the report would be probably the easy part. The more difficult part would be collating all the information for the briefing, and particularly getting all the traffic modelling completed and things like that. But that would be, it'll be probably. And I know the briefing session is, pretty well booked up till the middle of this year. So it will probably be, sometime towards the middle of this year.
So I'll start another question, Mr Mayor, if you don't mind. I also believe there's about $24.5 million worth of DCP payments that have come through. What's the impact of that if we do not go forward with this project?
Some of those, I think not all of the DCP money's been collected yet, but there is DCP to be collected. So it would really depend on if it's not constructed in accordance with what was agreed in the DCP, then that would have to be something that would be considered. If it wasn't built, obviously we couldn't claim the DCP funding for it.
Very last question, Mr Mayor. Point 2 only raises in regards to 5.2. Note the following council briefing. A report will be provided to the future meeting of council to confirm the scope and staging of the project, which can be used as the basis for further consultation. Are we able to expand that and include everything that we've talked about as well?
Yes, we could do that. So the issues in the in point 2. So when the report came back to council, it would include obviously the scope and staging, but we could include all the background and things like that in relation to it as well. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Carlino.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted some clarification about what you mean by planning control in the report here. What's actual planning control in terms of what the WAPC does for this particular road?
So that's in terms of setting the road reserve and the intersection treatments and access onto the road.
Okay, all right. But once the road's constructed, the City of Swan's constructing the road. Once it's constructed, it becomes a City of Swan road that City of Swan controls.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's under the care and control of the City of Swan.
Road.
But it's in a metropolitan region scheme.
So can you just tell me what a blue road is?
In the Metropolitan Region scheme, there's red roads, which are the main roads, and there's blue roads, which are such as this, where the planning control rests with the state, but the operation, maintenance, construction, etc., rests with local government.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to just ask about the Councillor Kiley was talking about the instruction from council to the state government to basically, what was that point that I just wanted? Have we given you instructions to speak to the state government?
No, not yet.
No, is that got to be included in this motion next week?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I mean, I'll touch base with Main Roads, we'll write to them and also touch base with the local minister to ask for clarification around the consultation process on that. So we don't need an instruction, I'll just go away and action that. Okay,
thank you. So that's going about the what they're doing down at the intersection of Reed Highway and West Swan Road, which is, I believe, are they basically putting in an overpass?
Yes, that'd be correct.
And that's West Swan Road's going over? Okay. And do you know why they've decided to do that now?
They've been gradually working on grade separations along Reed and Roe Highway for many years, and this is the one that has been arrived at now. So, future ones, Great Northern Highway will be grade separated, 2J Road, Morrison Road. So all the roads along there are intended to be grade separated as part of an ongoing program.
But not Eltone Road?
Eltone Road will be as well.
Okay,
at some
all right.
stage, yes.
And okay then. And just one final thing, that you're going to do this report or what have you, but I think that not enough has been asked of staff in regards the impact of Henry Brook Avenue on the Bush Forever site. And we heard from Mr Gratt this evening talking about ways for animals to access both sides. So I think it's really important that costings for those kind of, what did he call them? He called them overpasses or something. What did he call them now? Underpasses and overpasses. I think the costings for all of those need to go in there. We need to know exactly how many are needed. And also taking into consideration that there's this going to be, with underpasses, there's this prospect of flooding, so there's obviously going to have to be a combination of the two. To my mind, the real issue with Henley Brook...
Is there a question coming here, Councillor?
Yeah, okay. So I think that the question is, can we please have that in any investigations, any kind of planning or any kind of reports that you do from here on, because it's a very, very serious issue and I think it should be included.
Thank you. Councillor. Councillor Zanino.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I just want to let you know that I'll be withdrawing 5.2.
Okay, councillors, that's all the items we present. Is there any questions on any of the items on the agenda to any of the officers? Councillor Scanlon, you're first. Your question is?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's through to Mr Russell on 4.6. And with the neighbourhood centre that's proposed for Morrison Road, well, the amendment to the neighbourhood centre mentions convenience store, but there's already 3... It's on the plans, it's a service station, and there's already 3 petrol stations within a couple of 100 metres of that. Is there any way in this particular application that we can make comment that another petrol station is just not necessary?
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the salient thing here is that the service station's already been approved by the JDAP. So all that they're looking at here is a slight adjustment to the configuration and size, we're not asking, or it's not being considered to look at the placement anew of a service station that's already been approved. So it won't be possible to take a position to say that we don't want a service station when a service station has already been approved. You're only contemplating the nature of the change, modification to the configuration and disposition of the service station within the site. You're not looking at making a call whether or not to approve a service station per se.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-on question. The changes to the plans with the parking, does that impact the service station?
Through Mr Mayor, no.
No, just thought I'd try. Thank you.
Councillor Galano, you had a question?
Yes, I've got one for Mr Russell, and that's about the, it's this one here, the, sorry. Sorry, it's the Brabham petrol station, not, or, you know, childcare and, yeah, that's the one. 4.4, sorry. Walcott Avenue, Brabham. You know, the thing that really struck me about this one, and maybe you can give me a bit more information or shed a bit more light on, is that the report by the design, what's this real word for these? Design review report is actually quite scathing, in fact, on you know, lots of things to do with sustainability and heat sinks and asphalt. I mean, you know, basically it looks like this is a very old model and probably unsustainable. And I see that they've made some changes to reflect those problems. But then what I couldn't quite understand was when you put the recommendations up, you say, well, you can go ahead and endorse it with these slight changes, or you can actually not endorse it because actually it doesn't meet the principle of good design. So are we seriously going to take these design reports seriously, or are we not? Because it just looks like we're getting these design reports, we're not really taking it seriously.
Mr Russell.
Through Mr Mayor, I'm not sure whether Councillor Catalano is implying that the staff aren't taking it seriously or whether or not the nature of the outcome doesn't seem to read seriously following the recommendations of the design consultant. But look, I'll say this.
It's not casting any aspersions on staff. I was just wondering, like, the approach is, what's the approach that we're trying to take here? Because I just, you know, that's all I'm trying to, because it sets, these design reviews seem to be a new thing, and we're going to have more of them coming in, and I want to know, like, yeah, what's the approach we're going to take to these?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll outline the approach that staff are obliged to take. The design consultant is not the reporting agent here in this report. The design consultant has provided an independent assessment on a brief against the elements, broad elements of Design WA, and they provide advice to the city staff. And what I would hope this report has done is that we've looked at what the design consultant has said, and we've evaluated what the design consultant has said against the other factors of the application. You've got to balance out things such as functionality and form. And look, if you're interested, if you have a look at the comments that are made, in fact, on item 4.5, where, just by way of illustration, Mr Mayor, you have a design consultant that says that this is a bad design. But merely you've got to balance out the functionality of your built form in terms of the purpose it's seeking to achieve against your design outcomes. And the instance there is related to a service station of 4.1. We're saying the service station isn't a good design. But the design modifications suggested actually work contrary to the functional intent of the service station. So the role that we have to do as staff, or at least my strong preference in being reasoned and evaluative in recommendations and looking at recommendations on applications is to test those and determine in our position as staff advising the council and the RA whether we think that is a reasonable, orderly approach. So what we've got, it is not intended to be that the design consultant's word is the holy grail and the last word in the matter, and that we must in all instances follow without any form of analysis or review or critique the design consultant's report. So what we're doing here often is we're finding from our point of view, we're looking at it saying, okay, what degree of changes do we feel ought to have been made to the design that responds to some of the issues that the design consultant brings up? But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take the whole of those suggested changes, or in fact that the council has to agree with that, or more to the point that the JDAP has to. So what we're trying to do there, like everything else, whenever we get an application and there's various contentions made to saying it's good or bad, or will have this impact or that impact, we're obliged to independently assess, in our opinion, on the facts and with reason, whether or not what is being said is true and correct, or in certain situations isn't feasible or reasonable or appropriate in terms of being applied to the application. So I suppose the essence there, Mr Mayor, is we must always consider any submission, whether it's from a member of the public or even a design consultant, okay, as we find it and as we apprehend is the merits and applicability of their comments. So that's the only approach, and that's the approach across the board in terms of these things. And you take that on board as well, and then the JDAP will take that on board as well.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one about the temporary trading in public places, and I just wondered how that was going to tie in to C1.2, which is the Bennett Springs Park. There's or the Oval there. There's a proposal. Councillor Kiley's put up a proposal about like a transportable cafe in there. So, I mean, I see that this C1.2 is kind of restricted to these few sites. So what's the opportunities then for sites being added to this one down the track?
Mr Mayor, through you. In terms of the policy as it stands at the moment, includes the designated sites being identified as part of the policy. And in the review, we've looked at the possibility to remove those designated sites from the policy itself and make it an attachment that's easier to refine. But what we found is that in having to refine those designated sites, it will require input of ward councillors eventually. And therefore, at this stage in the review, we've kept the designated sites as a component of the policy, and this reviewed policy will then be advertised, which will give the opportunity for inputs to identify other designated sites. So that's how the policy is structured at this stage. With regards to the Bennett Springs Park, that is not a designated site in the policy. We've looked at the proposal by Councillor Kiley and first thought that it could be dealt with as a designated site, but and then the policy. The suggestion was that the designated site stays as it is for now, and then with the advertising, it will be reviewed. Now, what the temporary traders policy also allow is for temporary trading to take place in public areas. You can still apply separately from the designated sites. So, because a public open space is a public area, if you have a temporary trader that wants to operate within that site, they can still apply separately for a development application. So they have to get a development application on that site assessed, and also a separate trading license under the local laws. So it's still possible for somebody to apply. That is, if it is a temporary trader. In the instance of the building that is proposed by Councillor Kiley, that would not be a temporary trader. It will be per definition, it's a structure with it requires approval under the Building Act. So it wouldn't be, it would not be able to be dealt with as part of this policy unless it is a coffee van, for instance, which is not a structure.
Councillors, any other questions on any items on the agenda? Councillor Richardson.
Just a question through you, Mr Mayor, to staff, just regarding the childcare outdoor play area or the car parking. I think I can see about 14 spaces.
Which item?
Sorry, Brabham.
Which is?
The childcare, proposed childcare centre.
Okay.
We've got
4
100 places, 102 places.
So that's 4.4, is it?
Sorry, 4.4.
Okay. Mr Russell?
Including staff car parking, I think I can count 14 bays. Can you tell me how many bays are set aside for staff?
Through Mr Mayor, I think when we look at this development here, because you're dealing with it as a conglomeration of various uses that will naturally all have a shared parking arrangement, the way the assessment has been done is to look at the totality of all of the uses and the applicable scheme parking standards and look at the entirety of what's being provided. So it hasn't drilled down into indicating that a set number of bays are specifically designated exclusively for the childcare centre, whether between staff or parents dropping children off.
Thank you, Mr Russell. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor McNamara? All right, I'll get to that later. Councillor Lucas, you're next.
Just following on from Councillor Richardson's question, I thought I'd found the answer on page 225. Talks about 128 shared parking bays, of which 5 will be tandem bays for the childcare centre. So to me that means only 5 bays for the childcare centre, which may not be sufficient.
Good question. Oh, back to back, yeah. Okay. Conference item. Councillor Johnson, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. A bit of a change of subject now. My question is about item 2.1, policy review, organisational structure and designated senior employees on page 18. The question is, what's the reason for changing the job title of the executive managers to executive director?
Mr CEO. Oh, Ms Lay, sorry.
Through you, Mr Mayor. As part of the organisational restructure that was commenced late last year, a review was done of similar titles in other local government authorities, and this was simply to align with other nomenclature.
I guess then the question arises, if we're talking about nomenclature, if we've got a chief executive officer whose title is determined by the local government act, so he's a chief executive officer, then the people reported in to the chief executive officer would be executive officer corporate, executive officer operations. Wouldn't that make more sense if you're going to change it?
Through you, Mr Mayor. I can see the logic in what you're saying, however that's not consistent with other local governments' position naming.
And I guess the other question then is about the use of the word director. Does not that imply a board of directors?
Mr CEO.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, I think as Ms Lay's responded, it's consistent across the sector. I think the common terminology for the executive is either director or executive manager. The larger local governments in the Band 1 category all appear to go towards the director categorisation.
Councillor Scanlon. Do you have your hand up? No? Okay.
Have we not been told in the past by various people, such as Mr McLeod and those people, that we are directors?
Yeah, but we're talking about staff.
I understand that. I understand that, but you can't have director level here and a director level elsewhere within the same organisation.
Any other questions, councillors? Item on the agenda. We'll save the confidential one for yours.
Question, I didn't get an answer to that.
It was a statement more than a question. You can answer that. I did try to get a question out. It was a mistake.
I think through you, Mr Mayor, as I responded before, it seems to be consistent. I think under the Local Government Act you're called councillors. I can't comment on if Mr McLeod said something differently to council in the past.
If there's... Councillor Lucas.
I just want to comment on the current question before council for that naming across the board, because recently when we had an application for the CEO's position, a person was an executive manager at another local government, and I immediately thought as an executive manager they'd be on the same level, but they reported to a executive director. So if we can get consistency in the industry, I think it's a good thing. So all local governments' names of their staff are similar. Thank you.
Okay, right, councillors, before I go to close doors, I'll get rid of those items to be withdrawn. So far, I've got Councillor Zanino on 5.2 and Councillor McNamara on 4.2. So, councillors, I'll run through the items, and firstly that we had deputations on, which was 4.2, I've already got Councillor McNamara. 4.4, which is the RAR for the Walcott Street, Brabham. No one? 4.7, Restaurant Tavern. Charlie's got Henley Avenue, Nangow Road, haven't you? Yeah. Okay. So no one on 4.7. 4.8, Ellenbrook. 4.9, Baskerville. Sandpad. 4.10, which is demolition of existing house, Councillor Scanlon. 4.12, the Sea Container, West Swan Road, Henley Brook. None. 5.2, Charlie, C1, C2. Okay, I'll roll through the other ones. 4.1. 4.2's done, 4.10 done. 2.1. 2.2. 2.3. 2.4.
Yes, Mr Mayor, alternate motion.
Um, 4.3. 4.5. 4.6. 4.11. 5.1. 5.3. 5.4. 5.5. 5.5. 6.1. 6.2. 6.3. 6.4. 6.5. 7.1. Then we go to the notices of motion. Okay, so that takes care of those. Okay, now need to go behind closed doors. There's questions on the confidential item.